"I can't live without a man," said the Apache girl to the rancher. He let her stay with him. The rope creaked as if it had a voice, whispering its rough promise against raw skin. Lantern light flickered along the warped boards of an abandoned stockyard, throwing jumpy shadows over the girl tied to a hitch rail. Wind drove grit across the ground. Boots crunched. Someone laughed low and mean. The smell of kerosene hung in the air like a threat waiting to catch fire. Her name was Nayeli, an Apache girl barely into womanhood. Long black hair tangled with dust. Copper-warm skin streaked with blood and mud. Wide eyes reflecting the lantern flame like two coins dropped into a well. Her hands were bound behind the post, a gag cut at the corners of her mouth. She had run for 3 days across badlands and dry riverbeds, and the wilderness had stripped her to survival and stubborn heartbeats. "Look at you," said the man in the coat of black oilskin. Caleb Drax, a bounty hunter whose smile never reached his pale, frostbitten eyes. A jagged scar split his upper lip. He held a brand-new tin star that wasn't his, and a rust-caked knife that was. Around him were 3 riders, men who smelled of stale coffee, gun oil, and river rot. Wild thing with nowhere to go. Nayeli fought to stand taller, though the rope bit like teeth. She had learned to listen to the earth, to the crack of willow and the shift of sand. Now she listened to the hiss of the kerosene lamp and counted her breaths. She refused to cry, not here, not for them. Drax lifted the knife and set it gently, almost tenderly, against the rope above her wrists. "We're going to move you at dawn," he said. "A girl like you is worth more when she's docile. The folks in Las Armas pay extra for a story. And I," he added, "tell stories very well." From the darkness beyond the lantern circle came a sound, the slow jingle of tack, one rider, alone. The lamp flame guttered, leaned, steadied. Drax's smile thinned. His men turned, boots scuffing, the ground whispering beneath their heels. Nayeli looked up at the stranger easing his horse along the fence line. He sat deep in a saddle that had seen more years than most men. Ridge Talbot, 42, beard salted with grey, hat brim slashed and sweat-bleached, a puckered scar like a white lightning strike along his left cheek. A rancher's canvas coat hung off his broad shoulders. He swung down, boots finding earth with a weight that made the old boards answer. "Evening," Ridge said, voice like gravel rolled in a dry creek. His eyes touched the rope, the knife, the girl. They hardened. "Trouble here?" The lantern flickered again. The rope creaked. The knife tilted, and the night held its breath. Drax stepped into the light as if it were his stage. "Just law work," he said, tilting his head, letting the star on his coat's breast catch a lick of flame. "Runaway property. Folks in Las Armas lost something and hired me to fetch it. Are you from around here, friend?" Ridge's jaw worked once. He looked past Drax to Nayeli. Dust had caked at her lashes. Her breath came shallow, shoulders tight against the post. The rope whispered with every try she made to ease the sting. "Name's Ridge Talbot," he said. "From south of the Salt Flats. I mind my fences and what's inside 'em. Don't care for men who tie people to posts." Drax's smile broke the scar on his lip. "This ain't a person. She's a price." He sauntered closer to Nayeli and let the knife edge kiss the ropes again, not cutting, only reminding. "Her clan raided freight lines. At least that's what the paper says. Folks want peace. Peace costs." Kerosene trembled in the lamp's tank. The glass chimed faint. Nayeli tasted metal, fear sharp like old pennies on her tongue. Words burned at the back of her throat. She forced them past the gag, a muffled, desperate sound. Drax's hand clamped her jaw, thumb pressing at a bruise. "You hush," he told her, soft as a lullaby. "You hush until I sell your story." Boots shifted. One of Drax's men dragged a crate across planks, sat, and began to clean his revolver with a dirty square of shirt. The cylinder clicked, 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 steady as a clock in a parlor that never sees sun. Another man kicked at a tumbleweed. It scraped the ground and lodged against a rail with a dry sigh. Ridge scanned the scene. 3 rifles leaned on a fence, 1 lantern, 1 door in the stock shed hanging by a single hinge. A water trough. A coil of rope. He marked each thing, and where it belonged inside a plan he hated himself for making. He hadn't come here to save anybody. He'd ridden in because he'd seen the glow of a lamp where a place had been empty for a year, and habit made him curious. That, and the memory of his wife's voice, 10 winters gone. Don't ride past suffering, Ridge. A man is what he stops for. Drax slid the knife under the gag and lifted it. Air flooded Nayeli's mouth. She choked on the first breath and forced down the second. Her voice scraped like dry leather. "I can't live without a man," she said, looking straight at Ridge, eyes bright with stubborn shine. "The land will eat a woman alone." The words were not surrender. They were strategy, a rope she threw at a stranger in the dark. Drax laughed. "Hear that? She's already wise." He leaned close, voice dropping to the tone men use to spoil meat. "You'll beg prettier by sunup." Ridge's coat shifted as he breathed. His hand found the coil of new rope at his belt, thumbing the fibers, feeling the bite. He kept his voice quiet. "Untie her." "Or what?" Drax asked. The lantern flame bent, listening. Nayeli's wrists bled. And somewhere, a coyote cried like an old story still being told. Ridge stepped to the edge of the lamplight, so the glow brushed the scar on his cheek. He kept his hands clear of the revolver at his hip. "I ain't here to buy and I ain't here to beg," he said. "I'm here to say you're not taking that girl anywhere." Drax tipped the knife so the light ran down its spine. "You're one man against 3 and me. Even if your hand is quick, math is quicker." "I've outlived worse odds than numbers," Ridge said. The circle tightened, boots rasping, spurs licking metal, breath clouding in the cooling night. The third man, the one with the cleaned revolver, snapped the cylinder home. The click sounded like a door locking. Ridge took a slow step to put the water trough between him and that muzzle. The stock shed's broken door panted on its hinge, in and out, in and out. "Why?" Drax asked, and for a moment he sounded genuinely curious. "Why risk your hide on a stranger? She ain't your blood. She ain't your trouble." Ridge didn't answer with philosophy. He looked at Nayeli instead. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nayeli," she said, voice steadier now, as if saying it built a floor under her feet. "Daughter of Lucan, from the blue hills north of the Verde." "Good," Ridge said. "Hold that name. Don't let 'em rename you with their price." The man behind Ridge shifted. The trough sloshed. The lantern buzzed. Drax's eyes sharpened, and the knife midair felt like a held breath. "Last chance," Drax said. "Ride on, rancher." Ridge moved, but not the way they expected. His right hand went for the rope at his belt, not the gun. With a twist and a throw born from years of pulling steers from arroyos, the lariat sailed. The loop bit Drax's wrist, ripping the knife off its lazy arc. Drax cursed. The blade clattered to boards. "Ranger quick," Ridge yanked, dragged Drax forward. It wasn't clean in the dark, nothing was, but it was enough. Gunfire cracked. The world exploded into white heat and splinters. Bullets chewed the trough. Water fanned into the lamplight like coins tossed wide. Ridge dove, shoulder first, into the stock shed, splinters in his coat. He fired once, twice, returning thunder for thunder. A horse shrieked and kicked. A rifle fled from a hand. Nayeli, hands still bound, ducked as the rope scalded her skin. Drax recovered fast. He rolled, came up with a derringer he kept like a lie. He grinned through his split lip and aimed for Ridge's ribs. Nayeli did the only thing she could. She threw her weight into the hitch rail. The old post groaned. The rope sawed bone. The lantern wobbled and spit. "Friend," Ridge barked over the roar, "if you're gripped by this tale, hit that like button right now, because the fight is only just beginning." Drax's finger tightened on the trigger, and the lantern glass shattered, plunging them into a storm of sparks and darkness. Darkness swallowed the stockyard, but the night was not empty. It hummed with bootfalls, harsh breathing, the hot stink of gunpowder, the slick slap of water and blood. The horses danced, reins jangling like a pocketful of sins. Ridge moved by memory, not light. He'd been in cattle pens when lightning killed the lamps, and fear taught men to speak with their hands. He rolled left as a shot tore a board where his head had been. Splinters peppered his cheek like angry bees. He answered with a single round that punched a grunt out of the shadows and put one of Drax's men on the ground, moaning into his sleeve. "Light it," Drax snarled. "Light another." A match flared. For a breath, the stockyard returned in orange relief. Nayeli's face taut, mouth set, Drax's teeth bared. Ridge's revolver, black and sure. Then Ridge shot the match, and night fell again. He didn't wait for applause. "Get her loose," Ridge called into the dark to himself as much as to any mercy listening. He crawled, shoulders screaming where an old brake protested the world. His fingers found the post. The rope rasped. "Nayeli," he whispered. "Brace." She did. He slid his knife, plain ranch steel, clean and honest, between rope and skin. Fibers surrendered. The knots slackened like a jaw unclenched. Her wrists flooded with pain as blood returned, but the pain felt like a promise. "Run for the shed," Ridge said. "Back wall's soft, we can break it." A muzzle flashed. Ridge took the slug high in the arm, just below the shoulder. It burned worse than a branding iron, drove him to his knees. He bit the ground and tasted iron and grit. The world tilted. The stars wheeled. He put a hand over the wound. It came away warm and wet. Drax's boots thudded, deliberate. He liked to savor a win. "See?" he said into the night. Math. Nayeli reached for the fallen lantern's dented tin body, found the kerosene still sloshing inside. She yanked the rag from her hair, once used to bind her braid, now a fuse. She soaked it and struck flint off a spur that lay half buried in the dust from some forgotten cattle drive. Fire crawled up the cloth like a patient snake. She hurled the burning rag into a stack of tumbleweed, jammed against the fence. Flames licked dry brush and climbed. A low wall of light roared to life, amber and wild. Drax had wanted light. She gave it to him until it hurt. Silhouettes sprang into definition. Drax, lean and erect as a knife. His last man squinting behind his gun. Ridge, bleeding but up, braced against the shed. Nayeli stood between Ridge and the fire's heat, jaw set, eyes reflecting the blaze. "Behind me," Ridge said. "No," Nayeli answered, voice steady in the roar. "Beside you." Drax came on. Ridge fired and missed. Blood stole his aim. The last hired gun charged, and Nayeli met him with the lantern tin she'd kept in her left hand. She swung hard. It rang like a church bell off his temple. He dropped to one knee. Ridge stepped in, boot heel crunching bone, and put the man down for good. Drax lunged, knife out again as if born there. The two men met in a shock of shoulders, grunts, and breath. The knife kissed Ridge's coat and found meat. Ridge growled low and drove his forehead into Drax's face. The split lips split again. Blood and spit sprayed the boards. They went down in choking dust. Drax scrambled for the derringer. Nayeli kicked it with the iron heel of a borrowed boot. It skittered into the fire like a lie finally told. Drax howled and pulled the big knife back for a finishing arc. Ridge's revolver lay 3 feet away, an ocean in a fight. Nayeli saw what must happen and moved before the thought hardened. She seized the frayed end of the rope that had held her to the post. With a whiplash snap, learned from watching hands. Control horses. She slung it around Drax's forearm and yanked with everything the last 3 days had stored in her. The blade's arc bent. Ridge's fist rose and fell. Knuckles cracked cartilage. Drax staggered. "Ridge!" Nayeli cried. He rolled, caught the revolver, and fired once into the knight's open mouth. Drax dropped, as if the ground had finally told him the truth. The rope lay across his wrist, the fibers smoking gently from a lick of the fire. In the new quiet, the only sound was the hitch in Nayeli's breath and the soft tick of cooling metal. Ridge swayed, blood darkening his sleeve, boots rooted. "We ain't out yet," he managed. "Someone'll come looking for him." Nayeli nodded. The flames chewed the tumbleweed and slowed. Horses, trembling, lowered their heads to breathe. Somewhere far, Dawn thought about the horizon. "Can you ride?" Ridge asked. "I can until I can't," she said. "Then we ride." They left the stockyard behind like a bad dream that kept walking, and the sky ahead of them was the color of new steel. They reached Ridge's ranch by a red dawn that made every fence post cast long, thin shadows like tally marks across the land. The house sat low and plain under a leaning cottonwood. A windmill creaked slow circles, and the tank beneath it flashed like a coin when the sun lifted. Chickens muttered in a yard ringed with scrap planks and wire. A dog with a grey muzzle, Copper, lifted his head and thumped his tail once as if to say he'd seen worse nights and better mornings. Ridge slid out of the saddle and reeled against the porch rail. Blood had glued fabric to the wound at his arm. Nayeli was off her horse quick, boots scuffing, and guided him inside. The house smelled of coffee leather and the faint ghost of a woman's soap from a decade back. A framed photograph faced the mantel. A woman with calm eyes and hair tucked into a simple knot. Ridge touched the frame as one does a Bible, not because it's magic, but because it's familiar. "I can stitch," Nayeli said, voice all business now. "I've sewn skin and hide, sit." He did. She cleaned the wound with water that steamed from a kettle, her hands gentle and sure despite the inflammation in her own wrists. He hissed. She didn't flinch. The needle went in. The thread drew the separate edges together, a small bridge across a canyon carved in a single night. "You spoke in the yard," Ridge said after a while, staring at the ceiling boards that time had smoked. "Said you couldn't live without a man." Nayeli kept stitching. "Men own the roads here," she said. "They pay for stories told about us. Sometimes you give a man a hook so he thinks he's leading you where you already planned to go." She tied a knot and bit the thread. "Where I'm from, a woman can live without a man, but she can't live without a circle, a clan, a place she belongs." Ridge nodded like that confirmed something he'd always suspected. "You can stay," he said, voice careful, offering without owning. "I've got a bunkhouse with a door that sticks when the wind's out of the west. Fence needs mending. Calves come in 2 weeks. Copper's old and ornery about coyotes at night. You'll have chores and coin for 'em. Food's plain and the coffee's worse." She looked at him then, not at the scar, not at the wound, but at the man who had thrown a rope not to catch her, but to cut her free. "I will earn what I take," she said. "And I will leave when the road calls me by my right name." He almost smiled. "Fair." They buried Drax's noise by noon through quiet work. Ridge wrote a letter to the deputy he trusted in a town farther off, a man who understood that sometimes justice reached a place before the law did. He sealed it with wax he hadn't used in years and set it for a passing freight to carry. The hired hands who drifted in and out of the ranch read the air, read Ridge's bandage, read Nayeli's calm. They nodded. They kept to their tasks. When the sun fell behind the low mesas, casting the corrals in brass light, Nayeli stood by the windmill and watched bats flicker past like thrown ashes at heaven's edge. The rope that had held her hung now from a peg, clean, cut into 2 lengths, kept not as a reminder of helplessness, but as proof of what hands can undo. Ridge joined her, steps measured, coffee in 2 tin cups. They drank. The world smelled of hot iron and cooling sage. A train sighed somewhere distant, and coyotes answered with laughing complaints. "Folks will come asking about Drax," Ridge said at last. "Men like him don't die without someone trying to wear his boots." "I'm not leaving yet," Nayeli said. "This place," she nodded toward the bunkhouse, the dog, the slow windmill, "feels like a point on the circle, not the end of the line." Ridge considered that a long time. "You don't live because of a man," he said, as if telling it to himself too. "You live because your lungs want the world and your heart won't quit. If a man helps, it's because he remembers he's part of somebody's circle." Nayeli's mouth curved. "Then let us keep the circle strong." They stood a while longer, listening to the wind talk through wire and grass. In the distance, a rider crested a ridge and stopped, a dark pin against a bruised sky. Ridge saw him first. He didn't reach for a gun. He simply shifted so he and Nayeli made a line, not a ladder. The rider watched. Then he turned and went back the way he'd come. "Tomorrow," Ridge said, "we haul water to the north pasture. You know how to patch a trough." "I'll learn," she said. He nodded. "That's how folks live out here. Not without a man, not without a woman, not without each other, and the stubborn notion that a stranger's life is worth stopping for." The windmill creaked. The dog sighed. Stars pricked the dark one by one, lanterns someone forgot to douse. If you were in Nayeli's place, bound to a post with night coming on and men drawing a price around your name, what would you do? Would you throw your words like ropes and dare a stranger to catch them? Would you fight until the fire answered? Like this story if it gripped you. Subscribe for the next Wild West tale, because the West keeps its secrets until someone rides in and asks the right question. And if you want to see how the next battle unfolds, don't miss the next story. Subscribe now.